Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey into the very foundation of modern insurance operations, the Guidewire Data Model. Now, look, it's incredibly easy to look at a massive enterprise system like this and just see this complex, intimidating maze of code and database tables, right? But today, we're going to reframe that. We're going to look at the Guidewire Data Model not as some chaotic web, but as the literal beating heart of insurance IT. Think of it like a meticulously planned city. And today, we are taking a topographical tour of exactly how it all connects.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our agenda today acts as our topographical map to help us navigate this massive ecosystem step by step. We'll be hitting 1. Mapping the Guidewire ecosystem. 2. Core entities and relationships. 3. The 3 application centers. 4. Extensions and best practices. And finally, 5. Securing and scaling performance.
So, Section 1, Mapping the Guidewire Ecosystem. Let's get the lay of the land.
To really appreciate this architecture, we have to first understand the chaotic reality that insurers face every single day. We're talking about enormous data volumes and life cycles that can span decades. You aren't just processing a quick, one-off transaction here. A single policy might go through quotes, endorsements, renewals, and audits over many, many years. A claim, that might stay open for a decade. Keeping all of that organized requires a phenomenal foundation. I absolutely love this quote from our source material because it just hits the nail right on the head. If you work with Guidewire and don't understand its data model, you're essentially navigating a city without a map. If your daily job involves Guidewire in any capacity, understanding this data model is the ultimate solution for consistency and scale. It's how you ensure every rule, process, and integration actually works the way it's supposed to in the real world.
So what is it exactly? Well, the Guidewire Data Model is formally defined as the structured representation of all insurance data. We're talking about entities, attributes, relationships, and constraints. But in plain terms, this model answers 3 really vital questions for us. Exactly what data is stored, how is that data related to other data, and how is data integrity maintained? It uses what we call domain-driven design. This essentially means every major insurance domain gets its own highly specific set of rules and relationships.
And here is the real magic of Guidewire. Unlike generic one-size-fits-all enterprise data models that you have to heavily customize just to make sense of your business, the Guidewire data model is incredibly insurance-specific. It inherently reflects decades of specialized industry knowledge and best practices. Because this specialized foundation is already there out of the box, insurers avoid the absolute nightmare of building complex products and workflows entirely from scratch. Moving right along to Section 2, Core Entities and Relationships. These are our building blocks.
If the ecosystem is the city map, these core entities are the concrete, the steel, and the bricks. You're going to interact with these the most. Account, policy, job, claim, contact, exposure, and transaction. Literally everything revolves around these, and they follow very strict rules. For example, a policy absolutely cannot exist without an account attached to it. A claim can't exist without a policy or an exposure. The system forces the data to perfectly mirror real-world insurance logic.
And this brilliantly illustrates a critical architectural choice the system makes, separating identity from ownership. So an account represents the business relationship, right? While a contact represents a person or organization. By keeping these separate, John Doe can be linked as a driver on one policy and a claimant on a totally different one. The result? 0 data duplication and a perfectly consistent record every time. To enforce all this, the model relies heavily on parent-child relationships. Step 1, an account owns policies. Step 2, a policy owns coverages. Step 3, a claim owns exposures. Strict foreign keys enforce this structure because you never, ever want an orphan record just floating around in your database void. It's pretty much a developer's worst nightmare. Imagine a coverage just wandering around with no policy to call home. These strict rules keep the database impeccably clean.
All right, Section 3, the 3 application centers.
You can think of these 3 application centers as the main highways of our Guidewire city. This is where the product-specific data models actually live and breathe. And each has a completely different primary focus. PolicyCenter is all about underwriting and policy lifecycle management, handling your quotes, submissions, and rating data. BillingCenter, on the other hand, is built relentlessly around financial integrity, invoices, payments, tracing every single dollar for auditing purposes. And ClaimCenter is focused on lifecycle management, managing multiple claimants, tracking litigation, and evolving exposures over time. They share common concepts, sure, but each highway has a highly specialized data model tailored to its specific job. Let's move to a practical example and see how this builds over time. Policies sit at the very center of this ecosystem as what we call versioned objects. A policy isn't just a static, single record. It evolves. Day 1, it's a quote. Month 3, maybe an endorsement changes the coverage. Year 1 is a renewal. Year 2 brings an audit. Each of these changes actually creates a new policy period. This allows the system to maintain absolute historical accuracy through every single effective dated change. Which brings us to Section 4, Extensions and Best Practices. Time to look at our zoning laws. Because no two insurers operate exactly the same way, Guidewire allows for extensions. Think of these as our city's zoning laws. You do want to add fields to existing entities, and you do want to create custom entities when you need to. But, and this is a big but, you never modify the base Guidewire code or base entities directly. If you plan your extensions poorly or break these rules, it is going to severely hurt your system's performance and completely ruin your ability to install upcoming software upgrades down the line. Strict governance here is absolutely essential. A super important tool in your extension and customization toolkit are Typelists. These are predefined lists of values used everywhere in the system. Think of your standard drop-down menus for things like policy status or claim type. They can be static or dynamic, but they act as vital, standard reference data. By using Typelists instead of hard-coding values, you ensure incredible consistency across the entire ecosystem, which, trust me, is mandatory for clean reporting later on. And speaking of keeping things clean, we have 3 steps of data validation layers, acting as our city's security checkpoints. First, field-level validations ensure individual data points are formatted correctly. Second, entity-level validations check the logic of an entire record. And third, cross-entity rules ensure that complex relationships make sense across the board. These checkpoints are great because they prevent invalid data from corrupting your system before it even gets saved.
Let's head into our final district, Section 5, Securing and Scaling Performance.
Designing a brilliant data model is one thing, but operating this massive ecosystem in real time under extremely high volumes, that is another challenge entirely. Performance configuration matters deeply here. The keys are proper indexing to support high-volume queries, aggressively avoiding those unnecessary extensions we talked about earlier, ensuring your querying is efficient, and archiving all data. So the crucial point is this. If you ignore these data model performance keys, the result is basically guaranteed. You'll get painfully slow screens, massive batch processing failures, and ultimately really miserable users. Now, it's completely normal to face hurdles along the way. The most common challenges teams face are a steep learning curve, a tendency toward over-customization, poor documentation, and weak data governance. But I want to reassure you, these are almost always just process problems. They aren't limitations of the Guidewire platform itself. They can absolutely be solved with disciplined project management, strict naming conventions, and proper, thorough training for your team. We'll wrap up our tour today with a vital question for you to take away. Your business will inevitably evolve, but is your data model built to grow with it, or will it collapse under the weight of bad extensions? The Guidewire Data Model is a phenomenally powerful enabler of efficiency and innovation, provided you treat it as a protected shared asset. I really hope this explainer has equipped you to master your system configuration